Hi, this is Michael P. Coleman, Content Director for Brother Be Well. Thanking you for checking out this series, this trauma and healing series brought to you by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hello, this is Michael P. Coleman. I'm Content Director for Brother Be Well, and I want to welcome you to this particular video. We're going to be talking about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. We're co-partnering with this production with our friends at the Hawk Institute. And so I want to introduce some of those folks to you who are going to be joining us. First, we've got Andre Warren. He's the COO over at the Hawk Institute. How you doing, Andre? Great to see you.
Hi, Michael. How you doing? I'm doing great. Thank you.
Really good. Always good to see you. Two of those Hawk Institute mentors are also just joining us. Isaiah, what's up?
Hey, good evening. Good to be here.
Yeah, Matthews, he's a Hawk Institute mentor. And we've also got Jonathan Murray with us, another Hawk Institute mentor. How you doing, Jonathan?
How's it going, Michael? Glad to be here.
Really, really good to have you as well. Our guest speaker today, as we talk about ACEs exposure, is Dr. Bree Gentile. She's a senior product designer and researcher with an organization called Safe and Sound. Welcome back to the Brother Be Well platform, Dr. Gentile.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And as you can see, she's Dr. G. For those of you who didn't practice Gentile as much as I did, she'll remember I butchered that name as well in that earlier broadcast. So we can just refer to her as Dr. G during this. We've got three incredible youth, and I've been really blessed to be in their orbit for a while for a series of productions. Richard Toledo, how you doing, Richard?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing well.
Really good to see you again. Jaron Taylor, what's up, Jaron? Welcome to Brother Be Well.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to share this experience with everybody else.
Really good to have you here. And Ted Gatia, what's up, Ted? Good to see you as well.
Hello. Hi. Thanks.
Good to see you. And then finally wrapping this panel up, we've got Malik Sampson. He's our Brother Be Well clinical advisor. He's an associate marriage and family therapist with an organization just like the Hawk Institute. We couldn't do any of our work without hearyou.org. Malik, what's up?
Hey, happy to be back.
It seems like I just talked to you, doesn't it, Malik?
Right.
Just yesterday. Let's get into this ACEs exposure. It's something that I think many of us bring to our current days exposure that during childhood that are adverse. I'm going to let Dr. G kind of launch us into this topic. Dr. G, if you could talk about ACEs exposure and how it relates to mental health, and then Malik, if you could piggyback on that, follow Dr. G up. Let's just frame this conversation. Why are we talking about exposure that happens in childhood? For some of us, that was many decades ago. So why is it so important that we talk about this?
Definitely. So adverse childhood experiences, they don't necessarily stop when you're a child. And so a lot of times what will happen is the effects of it are going to continue on through your youth and then into your adult life. So the thing about ACEs is that it's actually a dose response, which means the more ACEs you have, the more problems. Or as I say to a lot of my youth groups, mo ACEs, mo problems, which it seems like nobody's really getting that reference anymore. So I might be dating myself at this point, but thank you. I appreciate that. So the issue with what that means basically is that the more ACEs you have, the more risk you are for these health outcomes, your heart, your lung disease, your cancers, anxiety, depression, all of the kind of ones that we're thinking about and talking about a lot. And so the reason why we talk about it, and we're starting to have conversations with younger kids, which is great. But the reason why we're talking about it is because it's so closely related to toxic stress. It's a really fine line between toxic stress and adverse childhood experiences. Mm. But the things that are coming up is people are wondering, like, what's going on? What's the deal with this depression and anxiety and obesity and what's really happening? And doctors are finding and taking a more holistic approach in asking, hey, what happened? What happened to you when you were young? What happened to you, even just like what happened to you in the last year? I think we're all kind of experiencing this low level of toxic stress that got people to have this conversation of like, what's really happening behind adverse experiences, whether they're childhood or adult.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing now is a little influx, as I like to call it, in caring about these traumatic experiences because they are showing up later on in life with some serious health outcomes. So Malik, I'm going to pass it over to you because I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Everything that Dr. G was saying is 100% true. So the thing is with ACEs, the thing is in general, a lot of your experiences come from childhood. So a lot of your outlook and how you see things as you grow up comes from your childhood experiences. And so with ACEs, when you're having these adverse childhood experiences, but you're not tackling them, you're not attacking like those traumas that you're having, it shows up in a lot of different ways. And one way in particular is like your interpersonal skills, your interpersonal relationships with people, depression, anxiety. A lot of those things stem from trauma. And specifically, a lot of the trauma that people are experiencing comes from childhood trauma. So with ACEs, it's important for us to remember that we need to be having these discussions like we are having now in order for us to even recognize our own adverse childhood experiences in order to continue to grow as individuals. And one thing with ACEs in particular is that you don't necessarily know you can't pinpoint it on your own, right? So a lot of the times. So sometimes you have to have these conversations and have even general conversations. Of course, I'm always an advocate for therapy, so I'm a little biased, but even these conversations that you're having with your friends, when you pick up on something and you think about, if someone's saying I'm having a difficulty like talking to my partner about these certain topics, and then you might pinpoint that, I'm also had a difficulty talking about that topic, but not to my partner, but to like my mom growing up, or like, and then they make that connection of, wait, I had this issue as a kid, and now there's this connection that you can make to where, okay, this experience that I had as a child is now impacting me as an adult. So how do I work through that experience so that it no longer impacts me in this negative way that it has been for a while? So the really big picture is identifying like, what is this adverse childhood experience that's causing me to have anxiety, to have depression, that's causing me to have a higher use of alcohol or drugs?
I hope that we have time. I appreciate that, Malik and Dr. G. I hope we have time during this session to really get at that. I call it a test. It's not really a test. There's no right or wrong answers. It's kind of a screener for adverse childhood experiences. Until about a year and a half ago, I was unfamiliar with them altogether. Although thanks to therapy from years ago, we touched on some of my own. But I was kind of surprised to learn that some of the things that I experienced from a very, very young age, some of them I don't even remember not experiencing, had such a potential to have an adverse effect on me living today. So it was an eye-opening experience for me. And I believe, Dr. G and Malik, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think there are 10 different measures or 10 different questions on that ACEs screener. Is that accurate? And I'm not ashamed, ashamed is the wrong word. I'm not shy about sharing. I dealt with 7 of the 10 adverse childhood experiences. So my joke is yours is, more ACEs, more problems, Dr. G. I tell people it's a miracle that I'm sitting in front of you now holding a cogent conversation, because I realize what I came through and what I have been able to overcome, but it was not easy. And it took a lot of therapy and a lot of work to kind of get over some of those adverse experiences. We hopefully will get to some of those later. I want to plug in some of our youth. Richard, let's start with you. I want to hear from Jaron and Ted as well. Richard, what are your thoughts about those experiences that you may have experienced more recently than some of us did, but are you familiar with ACEs, and do you kind of know where you fall on that spectrum?
No, actually, this is my first time hearing about ACEs, but I mean, I do agree with Dr. G and with Malik about, whatever it is you are confronted with or faced as a child, it does follow you if into adulthood if you don't cut the rope, right?
Yeah.
Or if you don't know how to deal with it. But I'm actually interested in where I fall into the ACEs test.
Well, I'll be interested if you feel willing and able to share. I may ask our engineer to drop that link to the exam. Maybe we could do it even while we're talking. Dwight, he's our engineer. He's making all of this look much more smooth than it really is. If Dwight could drop the link to that ACEs screener in the chat, maybe you guys could take a quick look at that and we could talk about that before we leave. Jaron, what about you? Is our ACEs, is that a new concept for you, or were you aware of it? And if so, can you share what some of your own personal background might be related to ACEs?
I've been familiar with the term ACEs before. I haven't really dug too deep into the details of it, but I understand the most basic concept of it.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that every child has faced. Like every single person has to face some type of adversity that has hindered their success. And even now I'm going through situations right now where I'm really contemplating, like, is this truly the best for me, or can I do better with myself to where I could face my ACEs and I could go past my ACEs so I could truly develop into a better person. But overall, it's just ACEs are common things that happen to people. Doubts, situations, they all appear in our lives unexpectedly. We're not going to be prepared for them, and we just kind of have to face them and move past them. And I truly believe that ACEs are something that every person has to go through. Because without adversity, you're not going to be the better person you want to be.
Absolutely, and that's a powerful statement. There is a slight distinction between adversity and those adverse childhood experiences, but we hear where you're coming from, and that was the wake-up call for me. That, you know, and the first session that I went through, everybody in the room, even people that didn't look like me, certainly the Black and brown people, seemed to be kind of overrepresented with some of those ACEs. Ted, let's just touch with you. Or is it something? Is our ACEs adverse childhood experiences? Is that a term you're familiar with coming into this, or are you learning about it today for the first time?
I think I've definitely thought about it before. I think in this term, the way that you described it, I don't think so. I don't think I've thought of it like that. But I mean, I think looking at my own life and some experiences that I've been through, I mean, I can definitely say that I definitely have certain things that I've carried with me all these years until adulthood that I'm still working on, just very slowly. But in terms of the way you described ACEs, I wasn't familiar with it in that sense. I didn't think like it was a full-blown, just way of really identifying it and then working on dealing with. I haven't thought of it like that, but I definitely know I've had, certain demons that I've carried with me for
years.
So,
We do have that quiz up in the chat, so if you guys can, you can take that. Even it just takes a couple minutes to do it. You can do it during this session and see what you come up with. Before we get into the first of two videos that I'd like to show you, I want to touch base with our Hawk Institute partners. Andre Warren, why don't you start us out? I'm interested in hearing from Andre and Isaiah and Jonathan. As you guys are mentoring young people, are you running into young folks who are dealing maybe with knowing it and maybe without, but they're carrying the baggage of some of that ACEs exposure? And if so, I just want to get your perspective on that. How prevalent do you think it is with the populations that you're dealing with, that you're working with? Maybe Andre, you can start us out.
Hello, Michael. Thank you. First of all, I think it's very prevalent with the population that we are working with. I think that a lot of the youth that I have served, they don't realize, and I don't think they're familiar with ACEs in the term, but they actually, I know they go through it because of the environment they live in, because of the situations that they've been put through. And for myself, I actually took the ACEs assessment, and because I dealt with anxiety and depression most of my adulthood, and I don't really know and didn't really know where it came from. But when I took the assessment, I only scored a 1.
Wow.
And, well, because a lot of things either I wasn't exposed to, or I was just more or less, I was one of those children that were kind of pampered and kind of like, things that didn't happen in front of me.
Yeah.
The only thing that I do remember that I scored on was my parents splitting up. And then one that really hit me was, I remember one time, me and my brother, we never experienced any arguments or fighting from my mom and dad. But there's one particular time that we actually got to witness it. And that there, it traumatized me and my brother both because we were scared to death of our father. You know, we wouldn't raise a voice or say anything negative. But that particular day when we seen him, you know, going at my mother that way he did, me and my brother took arms and, you know, we came after him and said, hey, this ain't going to happen.
Wow.
and to our surprise, he backed down.
Wow.
So I also believe that just like me and some of the youth that I serve, I think we go through these ACEs and don't really know it. Because for me to score a 1 is, you know, I think there's some things that I just, you know, I haven't recognized as ACEs.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. What about you, Jonathan? The youth that you're mentoring there in the schools, or from your own experience, how do you intersect with ACEs? How does it show up in your work and in your life?
It shows up. It is very prevalent because sometimes the guys how people things that happen in their early childhood guides them later on in life. So some of the kids is thinking of, you know, you're looking at talking to a kid 12, 13, and he's not looking nowhere past the age of 25, you know, or 26 or things like that, just based on the environment. He's not looking past anything like that, looking at, you know, raising a family or having kids. He's just thinking about everything now, you know. Those are ACEs. Those are things that he's going through, and that's what he's seeing in life. So that's all he can see is the now. He can't see nothing 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line. So they limit their lives. So it's not them looking for the future. So it's everything with them is for the now.
Got you. What about you, Isaiah? What are your thoughts in terms of the youth that you're mentoring and in your own life, ACEs?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm right in line with Andre and John, you know, not having, you know, the knowledge of it specifically or, you know, with the terminology. But yeah, definitely, I think it is those types of experiences in a way help us relate to the youth a lot more. And, you know, in certain ways, you know, we're by far not a therapist or, you know, in that realm to help those that we mentor. But you know, at least with helping them cope and kind of just giving them advice in the way that we've gone through it and we've dealt with it. And just to recognize that, you know, it's not something that will, you know, don't let it control your life, because you definitely will have to deal with it later on. But it also, you know, I think it was Jaron or somebody had mentioned that, you know, it's a way that you go through it and sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily deal with it, but it helps you grow and become the person that you're going to be, and whether we're negative or positive, you know, it's up to you to the individual to you know, kind of have constructive ways in dealing with that. So I think just recognizing that you know, it's a way to help us relate to the youth that we come in contact with.
I really appreciate that positive outlook to this. Isn't the first time, Isaiah, you've been in the middle of one of these productions and you have a positive spin on that. You reminded me when I took the ACEs assessment. I think you just gave me that word, Andre. I appreciate it. I was struggling. I knew test wasn't the right one. I really found myself, you know, sort of remembering, and we're going to get to this after we watch this first video, but it wasn't the easiest thing in the world for me to do, to reach that far back and really revisit some of those things. So I really always appreciate your particular take, Isaiah, that positive spin on even what can be some pretty brutal experiences. When you do the screener, you'll see what I mean. Some of us have really been through quite a lot. Andre, you're quite blessed when you said, I'm certainly not beating up on my folks. They did the best they could, but pampered is not a word I would have used to describe my childhood. So when I heard you say that, it just kind of got me right there. Some of us brothers, you know, got to enjoy a different experience.